Hello, and welcome to your holiday virtual wine tasting. Thanks for joining us. My name is Aaron Akanian. I'm the general manager of the Vinbin. Now, for those of you who aren't local or don't know about us, the Vinbin is a small, family-owned chain of wine and beer shops with cheese counters and cafe locations. So here in central Massachusetts, we have 4 locations. Right now, I'm sitting here in our after hours in our Hopkinton location, which is a beer and wine focused store with a great cheese counter. We have 2 locations in Marlborough, Massachusetts. One location is very much like this one. It's geared towards the beverage side of our business with beer, craft beer, and really cool boutique wines. And then in Marlborough downtown location, we have the craft beer and the wine, but we also have a full service cafe. And then in Southborough, Mass, we also have the beer and wine shop, but also the full service Vinbin Cafe, award winning, I might add. So if you are local, please come see us. Check us out on our website at www.thevinbin.com, and you can find out more information about our events like this one, our cafe menus, and you can actually shop our entire inventory on the website, which is really cool. That's a new feature for us. So what we're going to do today, and something we've had fun with over the, sadly over COVID times, is doing virtual wine tastings. So again, if you've never been to our stores, we are not a stodgy, we are not an uptight liquor store, wine tasting store. So what we're going to do today is go through 3 different wines and a couple of different cheeses, and we're going to talk about them briefly, each individual item. We're going to talk about what they taste like, what they go with, how to apply it to your day-to-day life and to your meals, and what you can do with it at home. I'm not going to bore you with intricate details or soil types and things like that. We're going to try to make this more fun and friendly. The first thing I want to tell you about today is that this is a lot of stuff, okay? You are in no way under any pressure to drink or eat all of this right now. So this is the kind of thing we designed, our tasting program is designed to kind of attack it as you want. So this video is something you can come back to as you drink these wines or as you eat these cheeses if you'd like. You can leave, a lot of people like to leave it on in the background while they're enjoying wine and cheese with their friends or significant others. And it's a great way to just kind of learn a little bit but not get too intense. What I like to do first is we're going to look at what we have in the bag, right? So in your package, in your wine package, you have 3 wines. You have the Zonin Prosecco, you have the Dr. L. Riesling, and you have the Angiulo Innocenti Cabernet. For cheese, you have the Manchego, which is the one with the ridges on the outside like that. And you have the Piave, which is the other cheese in the basket, a little more flaky looking. And then you have a box of crackers, my favorite ones, the Trésors, beautiful, thin, crispy wafer crackers. Now, as we dig into these, I think it's fun and interesting to give a brief sort of primer on how to taste wine. If you haven't gone to a wine tasting or been to a wine tasting, there are sort of things you can do to better appreciate a wine. And one of those things that we're going to we look at is our glassware. So you can see we have, what I use is just a pretty simple red wine glass, just a nice bowl, something you can swirl around in. Swirling is a big thing with wine. So what we're going to do every time you'll see me tasting wine, it's like second nature for me now. The first thing I do is I pour it in the glass. I smell it before I swirl it. I always smell it first and see what I get. And then I swirl it pretty aggressively. And then I smell it again. And what that does is it aerates the wine. It kind of moves it around. It wakes it up a little bit. And you can get even more aroma that second sniff. And when you're sniffing, you really want to get in there. Don't be shy. This is, we're all friends here. You don't want to be gentle. You want to really stick your nose in there. Then you're going to look at the color of the wine and see how it, see how the color maybe comes out towards the edge. That's, you can see if it's darker all the way through or lightens up at the end. Sometimes if you have a little white piece of paper, you can hold it against that. It's a nice way to see the color. That's one way to do it. And you want to sort of, when you're swirling it, you want to look at the wine. You want to see how, is it thick, is it thin, is it viscous, is it watery? None of these are things that mean the wine is better or worse. It's just things to note, things to look at. And then we get into tasting cheese. Now, I know a lot of you are into wine tasting, but I'm going to guess that many of you have never been to a cheese tasting, okay? So I taste cheese every day, and this is part of my job. So when we taste cheese, we evaluate it almost like we evaluate wine. we look at it, we want to see what the cheese looks like. Does it have holes? Does it have layers? Does it have crystals? You can see little white spots in it. You might see that in the Piave when we get to that a little bit later. And when you eat it, you want to warm it a little bit. You want to leave it in your palate so it can kind of open up. Cheese is always best at room temperature. So when you get, so if you haven't put your cheese out when we're doing this tasting, maybe pause me, and then you can kind of leave the cheese out a little bit, let it warm up, let it come to room temp, and that the flavors will come out a little bit more. Okay, so those are the primers. Those are the little sort of geeky things. But I think we should maybe drink some wine. So what we're going to start with today is the Zonin Prosecco. Now, Prosecco, if you haven't had some, is one of the hottest beverages in the wine world and in the alcohol world today. It's a sparkling wine from Italy. It's made with a grape called Glera. This is 100% Glera. And it's growing astronomically for a couple of reasons. The main reason is that if you want sparkling wine, but you don't want to spend as much as champagne will cost, I mean, most true classic champagne from France will run you at minimum $40 a bottle. You can go to Prosecco and you can find really tasty wines for that $15 range, sometimes less. And Zonin is a classic producer. They're one of the absolute creators of Prosecco. They really built it in this country to what it is now. And now in my business, what I see is people drinking Prosecco as a white wine now. It's not a sparkling wine anymore for them, and it's not a special occasion or a pop a cork for a celebration. This is a daily drinker now. It's actually on a lot of days rivals Pinot Grigio and Sauvignon Blanc for our white wine drinkers. And it's a fun wine. You can do a lot with it. The Zonin, this is what they call their Cuvée 1821. So 1821 is where they can trace their generations back to owning this property. And what you'll find in this is, first of all, we talked about glassware earlier. Now, when you guys drink sparkling wine, if you see champagne in movies or being served in restaurants, they often have those tall flutes, champagne flutes. They're really pretty, but they're really not very good for tasting wine. So I actually prefer a real true wine glass when I drink sparkling wine, because when you have a little flute, you can't, as we talked about, really get your nose in there. You can't get the aromas, and it's really closed off, so you kind of lose some of the drink. And while it's pretty to look at, it's not giving you the best experience. Okay, so let's do our little show here, right? So you can see right now what's really cool about this is the bubbles are really small. So a lot of times with Prosecco, with low quality Proseccos or low quality sparkling wines in general, when you see the bubbles, they're really big. They almost look like beer bubbles, right? So that's a sign of a kind of a lower quality wine, and it's not pleasing to drink. It has a beer mouthfeel to it, and it's not silky. So right now, off the bat, I can see these little bubbles are actually really nice and tiny, and it looks really silky and soft in the glass. It's very pretty. On the nose, I get tons of green apple, tons of citrus, and a really nice nutty, almondy, like marzipan kind of aroma to it. That dessert almond paste. Wow. Prosecco, when we get to the holiday season like we're in now, it's kind of a perfect starter. That's why we're starting with it here. I like to serve Prosecco to guests when they arrive at a party, because it just kind of wakes you up. It gets you feeling good. And it also, if you're going to be serving a nice meal, it wakens up your palate. Those bubbles are lively. And it's just a nice way to start off a day, start off an event or a party. So let's give it a shot. Now, the other part about tasting wine is once it gets in your mouth, you want to let it move around your palate a little bit, because your tongue has taste buds all over it. Sweet, bitter, all over there. So when you see me tasting wine, I swirl it all throughout my mouth. You also see me spit. You guys shouldn't spit, because you're at home. You're having fun, right? I'm having fun too, but I got to drive home after this. I don't live in the store, contrary to what some people think. Yeah, so on the palate, this is just all the classic notes of Prosecco that you look for. This is zesty, it's bright, it's citrusy, it's really lively. The bubbles, like I said, are tiny, so on your palate, it's silky smooth. It's not like drinking a carbonated beverage like a stout seltzer. It's really lightly bubbled. It's very nice. So what would you do with Prosecco if you were going to have it with a meal? Well, for me, I do it with light cheeses. I do it with, you know, any soft cheese, really any cheese at all. Light appetizers, even with like Prosecco. So one of my favorite little pet pairings, and people don't do this enough, is sparkling wine and fried food. So like one of my favorite things to have is champagne or sparkling Prosecco and fried chicken. It's like the best. That saltiness really pairs well. So that's something you can do with it. And with a wine like this, it's not, you know, this is not an overly expensive bottle of wine, and most Proseccos aren't. So this is the kind of wine you have a few glasses of, and then whatever's left, you leave it in your fridge, and the next morning, mimosa all day, right? Really easy. Never use champagne in a mimosa. Never spend more than $15 on a bottle you're going to put in a mimosa, please, okay? Beautiful. Really nice sparkling wine. Great way to start a party. So let's look at a cheese now. We're going to look at our first cheese of the day. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Manchego. Okay, that ridged one there. Very, very classic cheese here. Here at the Vin Bin, we have some, we change our cheese selection a lot, but we have some staples. Manchego is a staple. It's actually a staple of just about any cheese shop in the world. And if they don't have, if you go to a cheese shop that doesn't have Manchego, you should leave that shop. It's a Spanish cheese. It's from the La Mancha region. It's made from this all sheep milk cheese that comes from this the La Mancha cows. They're a breed that's been breeding for thousands of years in Spain. So what I always tell people about this cheese is this is basically the way the Spanish treat Parmesan is the way the way the Italians treat Parmesan is the way the Spanish treat Manchego. So when you go to Spain or you go to a nice Spanish restaurant, this is the cheese that gets finished on everything. It gets grated over pasta. It's served with their charcuterie. It's the cheese that's in the middle of the table all the time, and it's super versatile. It's also got really great flavor. So again, let's look at this cheese. Let's give it a smell. So for me, I mean, this has a gamey smell to it. It smells like sheep. It smells like the farm, which is great. I like that, right? That earthiness. So when we eat it, I mean, it kind of reminds me of eating Parmesan a little bit. It's salty, it's nutty, it's got a really nice crumbly texture to it. This is not a very aged Manchego. This one's only aged about a year. You can find them up to 8 years. They're really intense. They're really dried out. They're fun and they're cool to eat. But I prefer eating a younger one because they're just a little bit more. They're a little more versatile. But this is it's got some really nice, interesting flavor, and it's got that really great. Actually, with the Prosecco, the little almondy, nutty notes and the nutty, almondy kind of play with this cheese would do really nicely. As far as how you serve Manchego, what I like to do with it is pair it with something sweet. So classically they'd pair it with a quince paste in Spain. In the United States, we don't see a lot of quince paste. It's not as prevalent. So I like it with a fig jam or honey. It's really nice, drizzle honey on top, and it melts great. So you can like I said, use it like you would use Parmesan. Shave it onto pasta, even on a pizza. I used to have an employee who would put it on nachos. Unbelievable. So that was a really great one too. It's a really fun cheese and kind of goes with everything. So one thing we designed these two cheeses for is to kind of play throughout this whole meal. I don't necessarily have to pair one of these cheeses with one of these wines. You can do a multitude of different things, okay? And that's how I like to enjoy my cheese and wine. I don't like rules in beverages so much. You won't see me tell someone they can't have white wine with steak or they can't have red wine with fish. I'm not that kind of guy. What I always say to people, and my favorite phrase is, if you're eating something good and you're drinking something good, you really can't go wrong. Okay, so when we think about that, next time you go to a restaurant or you're at a liquor store or a wine shop, just make sure you get a good bottle, okay, and then order good food. You'll be fine. You won't. The pairing is sometimes irrelevant. There are classic pairings, but you want to make sure you're drinking something you like first. Okay. Now, let's go on to wine number 2. So this is the Dr. Lewsen Riesling. Now, some people out there are probably kind of scared of drinking this. I know when I'm in the store day to day, people are kind of nervous when it comes to Riesling. Everyone gets scared that it's gonna be too sweet, and they think they don't like sweet things. But I think Riesling is one of the absolute most undervalued and underappreciated wines in the world. They are so versatile. They have great acidity. They can be bone dry. They can be super dessert sweet, and they can be medium dry, medium sweet, like this one. It's a wine that pairs with tons of different foods. You can get them from. You can have great wine in the sort of entry-level category, in the mid-level category like this one, and you can have wines that are outrageously delicious in their luxury category. Riesling is actually a wine that ages tremendously. So if you're someone who's thinking of finding wine to put down in the cellar for a little while, think about Riesling. Because of its high sugar content, it really can last quite a while, and it really develops. It's a beautiful, beautiful wine. And when we get into the holiday season, it's a wine we recommend a lot because of its food versatility. But let's get into trying this wine first. So like I said, Dr. L, very, very, very traditional brand, very well-known brand, one of our absolute top-selling Rieslings of all time. I've been working for the Vindman for almost 15 years. We've been selling this wine year in and year out, particularly in the fall. So let's look at it here. Boom, right off the bat, Riesling is so aromatic. Pear, citrus, that almost like a lemon curd dessert kind of thing going on. Really bright on the nose too. Let's swirl it up and see what we get out of that. Even more. Now, even more of those classic aromas, a little honeysuckle, really floral. It's just a really pretty wine. Let's take a sip. Wow. So like I said, I've been carrying this wine for 15 years. I've had this wine thousands of times. And Rieslings, to me, they just, like, my mouth is watering. It makes my jowls, the sides of my mouth water up. Just that beautiful acidity, that really nice sweet, like peach and apple, tons of grapefruit, tons of lime zest. It's so layered, and for a wine that's not, this is a nice classic $15 bottle of wine. It's just beautiful. And for those of you out there, I mean, it is a sweet wine. It does read sweet, especially in the mid palate, right in the middle of your tongue there. You can definitely get the sweetness out of it. But just imagine pairing this up with a salty cheese, okay, like we have in front of us. Try it with the Manchego. Try it with the Piave. Imagine pairing it up with what we recommend it with is your Thanksgiving dinner, or as we get closer to the Christmas holidays, a Thanksgiving turkey, or even a ham. Those really savory, but like, savory foods that need to be woken up with something sweet. Like when we think about Thanksgiving, and think about Christmas when you have turkey, right? What do you put on it? Cranberry sauce. What's cranberry sauce? It's sweet, right? So you need something sweet to liven everything up. Everything is so savory. So when you have a slightly sweeter wine, it really works. It really plays well. Now, the other thing I love Riesling with, and I'm a Chinese food junkie, is with Asian foods. So Chinese food, Indian, Thai, anything with a little spice to it, a little sweetness goes a long way in mellowing it out. Now, when we look at our cheese board here, like I said, I would definitely try this with the Manchego. In fact, I'm going to try it with it right now, because that Manchego is so salty and it's so nutty. Perfect pairing. Really works nicely. Actually, to be honest, I don't think I've ever had this pairing before, and it works really nice. That really is a nice salty, nutty cheese. Wow. Very nice. Let's just briefly talk about the crackers. I think crackers are really important for any type of cheese board, cheese plate, late night, watching TV, need a hunk of cheese. You always need like the right cracker to go with it. These are my absolute favorite, these Trésor crackers. So this is just a basic plain sea salt cracker. It's a wafer sort of waffle texture, so it's super crispy, it's super light. You can even, when you break it open, you can even see like it's got layers to it. It's really nice. So the cracker itself tastes really good, that really nice saltiness. But really, in its essence, a cracker is just what you use to get the cheese to your mouth, right? So I don't really like crackers that have herbs and nuts and fruit and all kinds of stuff in them. They have a place, but for me, it's always a plain cracker, a little sea salt, or fresh bread. Fresh bread is awesome, but we didn't have fresh bread today. But these crackers are killer, and I will eat the whole box. So, before we get on to our last wine, let's talk about our second cheese. So the second cheese is the Piave. It's got a little bluish label on it. It's that more firm, denser cheese. Piave, like kind of similar to Manchego, is when you first start working at a place like the Vin Bin or a cheese shop, like Piave is the #1 cheese you go to. One of the ways we teach and train employees is, because we have so many cheeses, I always teach them that for the first few days when they come in, they should pick 2 or 3 cheeses a day that they're going to kind of dive into, try them, and that's going to be the 2 or 3 cheeses they're going to sell to people if they come in looking for cheese. When we get past the 2 or 3 they were working on, then I'll step in and help. But Piave for me was one of my first when I first started here. It was one of the first cheeses I ever tried, and one of the first cheeses I could ever really sell. And it's still to this day a cheese that I go back to time and time again, and I always forget how delicious it is until I have a piece. It's a cheese that's basically a younger brother to Parmigiano Reggiano, which is sort of the king of Italian cheese, maybe one of the kings of cheeses in the world. This is a all cow's milk cheese from Veneto in northern Italy. You find them aged all different types. This is aged about 9 months, so it's not overly aged. As you snack on this cheese, as you eat it, you will get flavors that are very similar to Parmigiano Reggiano. Salty, nutty, and even this tropical fruit note. If you smell this, you almost get like a pineapple-y kind of aroma to it. That's a really good sign of good cheese. And you get a bitterness, a little almond nuttiness. The other thing we'll see in this, and you can even see it, I can see it on my piece here, little white specks. Maybe it doesn't come up on the camera that well. Little white specks on there, and that's crystallization. So as cheese ages, the proteins in the cheese will crystallize. And that's what gives you, if you've ever had a nice aged cheese, that crunchy texture. Sometimes people think it's salt. Sometimes people think there's something wrong with the cheese. It's actually a really, really desired product. You want aged cheese to have that texture. It's awesome. And when you're eating it, you get that nice texture. It's got great texture. It's a heartier, more full-flavored, full-bodied cheese. And so you can use it like Parmesan. You can shave it, you can grate it, you can put it on pizzas or pastas, but it also is a softer, not quite as dried out cheese like Parmesan. So it's better for snacking and eating with sliced salamis or prosciutto or anything like that, or just on its own like we have here. It's a cheese that loves both red and white wine. For me, it's one of the few cheeses that pairs well with red wine. I know it's a common thing to think that red wine and cheese is like this all-time pairing, but in actuality it's kind of difficult because cheese is so fatty and rich, and red wine doesn't have the acid and the lightness to sort of cut through the fat. So when you're doing red wine with cheese, it really helps to do these more aged, slightly drier cheeses that are more robust and full, like a Piave or a Parmigiano or a really aged cheddar. So we're going to do a red wine. We're going to finish up with our red here, and this is the Angulo Innocenti Cabernet Sauvignon. Now, kind of a fun thing. Fun is so hard. It's not nice to say during COVID, but kind of an interesting thing that's happened to us in the COVID timeline is, being a retail location, we've had wines come available to us that were not available to us previously. And in the wine world, there are wines that are built and made specifically for restaurants to pour. And this is actually one of them. This is actually a wine that was restaurant only here in Massachusetts for a long time, but sadly, because the restaurants are struggling so much right now, wines become available to us that we couldn't have before because the restaurants can't take them in. So with this wine, this is a 91-point wine from James Suckling. James Suckling is a really well-known wine reviewer. So 91 points, pretty killer. This is from Argentina, from Mendoza. Now, if you've had any wine, red wine, over the last 10, 15 years from Argentina, you've almost surely had Malbec. You've probably heard of Malbec. Now, Malbec is a grape that Argentina made super famous, and it's probably their top. It's probably the 80% of their wine is Malbec. But they do grow other grapes, like this one, this Cabernet Sauvignon. Now, Cabernet is easily one of the more popular red wines in the world. You've probably drank many, many Cabernets in your life. Anytime you go to a big steakhouse, you get Cabernet. Anytime you go to a restaurant, you see 2 or 3 Cabernets by the glass. It's the most popular red wine in our store and the most popular red wine in the market. What it's known for, what it's classic for, is being full-bodied, chewy, dense, and really full, really intense. And this is just that. So on the first nose, for me, this is a really interesting one because this is not overly fruit forward like American Cabernet can be. When you get if you go to a steakhouse and you get a classic, one of the big name ones like Silver Oak or Jordan or some of these bigger name Cabernets, they're full of fruit. You can smell these sweet red fruit on it, and it's not wrong. It's really pronounced. This has way more earthy tones to it. This smells like it has like a leather jacket nose to it, a little bit more woodsy. I also get a really cool, especially when I swirled it, this black olive, Kalamata olive, that meatiness to it, very savory nose, very salinity, almost saltiness to it. For fruit, I do get a black currant. I do get that raisiny, tart fruit. Let's give it a try. Yeah, so more of the same flavors that I got in the nose. Really pronounced, like fresh leather jacket kind of thing going on. There's some vanilla there from the barrel aging. You get that from the toasted wood. You get the black currant. There's a really nice blackberry jamminess to it. One of the things I always find with wine, especially when I do these virtual tastings, because I'm preparing to do these tastings for a little while, so I open the bottles, I sit them down, I try them early in the day to make sure there's no flaws in them. And with this wine in particular, when I first tried it, it was much more that dry, earthy, spicy barnyard kind of notes. And now I'm getting more fruit. It's opening up with a little bit more of a little bit more juiciness to it. Not an overly monstrous tannic Cabernet. This is not something that you probably don't need to have food with this. You can sip this on a weeknight, no problem at all. It's not a big deal for you don't have to have a big steak with it or something off the grill. It's really drinkable. Now, when I pair Cabernets, obviously classically with steak, red meat, anything like that, burgers, even like Italian food, even with a nice hearty bolognese or something like that, you want to have a really nice full meal with a Cabernet. That's why they're so popular at steakhouses. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. We tasted some really cool wine today, some really nice cheese, and I want to thank you for joining us. And like I said, I want to thank you for inviting us into your homes for your holiday season. I hope this is something that gives you a little bit of respite, a little bit of enjoyment as 2020 winds down, and it's been a difficult year for all of us, but hopefully this adds a little bit of enjoyment to your holiday season. I ask that you please stay healthy, be well, and be kind. Thank you very much. Have a great night.